Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and Friends of Baylor. Well, it's 100 episodes. I mean, who would have believed? My sister said, in your 100th episode, at least be optimistic about something, please. And so I am going to be optimistic because, if you think back to the old Spanish flu, 1918, by 1920, it was really kind of gone. Well, we're about at that same stage, 2 years. Now, I don't think it's going to completely disappear like Spanish flu because we still have plenty of parts of the world that are still unvaccinated where the virus is replicating, particularly in Africa and some parts of South Asia. So, it's going to be around. It'll start moving hopefully into endemic land, and if there's no major new, variant, we should be okay. And the best news is if you look at what's happening in the U.S., we were on fire. We're maybe smoldering now, but that's definitely a huge improvement. If you look at USA cases, finally, we're down to below the peak we had with Delta. That's despite having almost 40% of the country still not vaccinated. Most of those people getting infected now. In our Texas Medical Center, we're down to 2,000 cases. Of course, we want it to be at 200. And we're down to about 200 hospitalizations. And the CDC recommends that we're, if you think about when you're at moderate to low risk in your community, it's somewhere around under 10 per 100,000. We're at 200 per 100,000, so we're still high risk, but it's coming down. And I do think that, we are at a level now, below where Delta was. And even our wastewater data from the city shows that the amount of virus in the wastewater is actually less than it was in the peak of Delta, and it's almost back to where it was in the beginning. So lots of reasons to be optimistic. So after 100 episodes, 100 of these, you'd think we would learn some stuff. We would actually learn. We gain new insights that we didn't have. We could never have predicted this. And this is one thing I've been listening to all the pundits on TV. Could never have predicted this. This was unpredictable, unprecedented. Well, that gives everyone a giant excuse to get a pass on why we weren't prepared. So was it really unpredictable? Was it just came out of nowhere? Well, funny you should ask, because the Gates Foundation sponsored an event called Event 201 in New York City, and it was basically a tabletop exercise, postulating what would happen if we had a pandemic. Now, this exercise took place in October of 2019, 2 months before the very first case of SARS-CoV-2. So, kind of fascinating. And what they thought was, well, it'll probably be a coronavirus, and it'll probably be a coronavirus that they possibly would come out of Brazil, and it was in Brazilian pig farms. We'd had the swine flu, so that was a thought. It'd be another species. Well, actually, they should have thought it would come out of Asia, because that's where most of the coronaviruses that exist in the bat colonies. But they postulated it came out of Brazil, and there would be 65 million deaths. They're off. We only have about 5 to 10 million, and 65 million deaths, and it would cripple travel, trade, the global economy. Social media would be rampant with rumors and misinformation. Governments would be collapsing, and citizens would revolt. I mean, not quite as bad as that, but a lot of it is actually right on, And so what they postulated was that there would need to be vigorous government and private partnerships to deal with this pandemic. And their suggestions, this kills me, 2 months before our pandemic, 2 months before, they said, we should be prepared with an emergency response, particularly around communications and medical countermeasures with distribution of materials that would be important in a pandemic. Duh. And we didn't have any of that. We should enhance internationally held stockpiles of medical countermeasures like vaccines. We didn't have any of that. Develop plans to mitigate economic damage by maintaining key travel and trade routes. No kidding. We didn't do any of that. Increase the ability to rapidly develop, manufacture, distribute, and dispense large quantities of medical interventions like vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. Well, we did okay on the vaccines, but the diagnostics were slow. Therapeutics, we're just getting those now. And then really importantly, increase the amount of funds for countries, so that they could survive as, the economic downturn. And this, my favorite thing, their sixth recommendation, develop methods to combat mis- and disinformation including, I love this, including that the virus was man-made. So, this is all completely predictable. So the point is that if it's predictable and it happened, we should be making plans to take care of this in the future. It's not out of the blue. It's not something we haven't seen. We've seen multiple pandemics. Flu, SARS, MERS, HIV, Zika, West Nile. This is going to continue to happen unless we get our acts together as a people, as world citizens. So, of course, I went through this with Lily, and she said, "Come on, there's other things that need to be done because I think there." And she had additional 8 points. So I think these are things we need as a country to think about. First of all, the most impressive thing, we had the most deaths, and it really is along the disparities of healthcare. So we have, our country has not got universal health care. And the communities that are underprivileged had the biggest mortality. So we need to address the disparities in healthcare now. We can't just keep putting it off. We need to figure out ways that everybody in this country can get health care. The other thing is, the NIH announced there were 6 vaccines in development. 5 of them went forward. They were all in industry. Ours, Peter Hotez's vaccine, was not picked to develop. Well, why? Why shouldn't we be thinking about cost of vaccines in the front end? So it's great to have, cutting-edge new technologies that worked, and I'm very happy that our country has those. But we should be thinking about how do we vaccinate the world and have other strategies besides just let high-tech companies do it. I think that was a mistake on our part. And I think that every company that gets any kind of support for vaccine or drug development needs to have a plan for global distribution. What was the plan? Where is the plan for global distribution? We still don't have one. And as long as Africa is not vaccinated, there's going to be more variants. And in this one, really, the social media issue, I'm sorry, if they can have algorithms that can, if I go on the internet and suddenly the last 3 things I shop for pop up in front of me, you ought to be able to have an algorithm. If people say, I just saw flying pigs, you ought to be able to say, well, that's probably not correct. And it's just an algorithm. How many times do you see flying and pigs in the same sentence? It's natural language processing. These companies can figure out how to deal with misinformation. They should be required to do so because that has been one of the reasons why 40% of our country is not vaccinated. And then, we're talking about infrastructure bills to build, bridges and roads. Well, what about public health at the state and local level? The CDC needs support. Viral sequencing. Why haven't we been sequencing all the viruses? We're getting this from UK and South Africa. We had one of the most extensive viral sequencing infrastructures for HIV. Why didn't we do that for SARS-CoV-2? And we had a clinical vaccine trial network for HIV. Why didn't we develop one that's robust so we can do more clinical vaccine studies in our own country? Antivirals. These viruses are pretty much the same. They have slightly different variations, but you can inhibit their replication, as we're seeing now. There ought to be drug subsidies for this all the time. There ought to be a bunch of strategies to inhibit RNA viruses and DNA viruses, so we aren't waiting at the very end of a pandemic to get drugs that are actually useful to treat. And of course, as they mentioned in the tabletop exercise, how about a strategic reserve for medical supplies? We have it for oil. But we went for 6 months with having too little PPE. That's just crazy. And they mentioned the World Bank needs cash reserves that help countries that are, developing countries when they're in economic distress. So, we should take a lot from what we've seen in this pandemic and hopefully fix some of the problems and prepare for the next one, because there are going to be other pandemics. And this one's not over, but there will be others after this as well. So, because it's our 100th episode, we thought we'd go back and look through memory lane and pick up some of the highlights from our previous 100 shots. But before we do that, I want to just update on a few more things. The Winter Games. We won't use the O term. Now has over 500 people positive. Way to go, China. Didn't quite keep out the virus as we knew they wouldn't. Harris Health received the elite status from the Commission on Cancer Accreditation. Fantastic for Safety Net Hospital being rewarded for its outstanding cancer program. Want to thank Neil Cambronero, one of our pediatric heart surgeons, who gave me a cookbook from Balthazar, one of my favorite New York restaurants. I made a great dish. I hope to show you soon. And because it's the 100th episode, Lily has finally decided she's going to start her own Instagram account. So be watching for the Instagram account. And enjoy several excerpts from the past 100 episodes. And I can't wait to see you next week. Happy Friday. I just want to say that it's been another week in COVID-19. It seems like another year. 3 weeks ago, we closed the rodeo, and at the time, that seemed like a really, really controversial move to make. Our hearts go out for everybody who is feeling like they are really embattled in this horrible fight against the virus. Baylor College of Medicine, called to care. We had a shortage of PPE and we needed it with our healthcare providers. So how do you make those decisions? Well, that's what the incident command structure is for. Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine. Yet another week through our wonderful COVID experience. The spike protein was acquired in a transitional animal, the pangolin, which is a member of the anteater family. Now, the reason I know this is fact is because when facts happen, the first thing you do is make a t-shirt. You know, I was watching CNN, and guess who I saw? Of course, Peter Hotez, for the third or fourth time. I actually have spent more time with Peter Hotez in the last 2 months watching him on TV than I have in the 9 years that he's been here.
I'm faking glow, makes my lips toss my hair and turn
On Tuesday, they went out to protest. They wore their white coats, and it was white coats for Black Lives. What happened to my buddy Tony Fauci? I mean, he was about to be voted the sexiest man in America, and he hasn't been on TV for a couple of weeks, so I'm not real. Hopefully, he's still okay. If you walk into a restaurant or a bar and it looks like pre-COVID times, get out of there as fast as possible. Governor Cuomo is now picking on Texas.
They are going up, and we are going down.
Mainly because we picked on him before. Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine, and now I'd like to say, and friends of Baylor College of Medicine, since we have so many other people who apparently are watching. Main shout out by far is to the teachers who are trying to deal with this pandemic. 365,000 people from all over the country end up in Sturgis. A few weeks after, the Midwest lights up and is now the hot spot of the United States. So University of Arizona, which has thousands, 50,000 kids, what they've done is look at wastewater from each of the dormitories. And we are in the middle of just a horrible spike. We're now over 11 million cases in the United States. And if you look at it, it's just unbelievable. So the other big news, of course, is we received our vaccines this week. And more people get vaccinated. The population becomes less and less susceptible. We got the Pfizer vaccine. We'll start with some of the bad data. The USA is obviously in the midst of its surge, over 24 million infected. Now we peaked over 400,000 deaths. None of these people wore masks, who were clearly positive, had tested positive. These lucky 24 tourists were in the back of the airplane. Concern was this particular variant is even more infectious and potentially might avoid the effects of the vaccine. So we don't know that yet. Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine and friends of Baylor College of Medicine. We're rolling, we're back. Not completely without some wounds. There's no water in the office, the pipes are broken, the banana trees are dead. Unfortunately, we also reached one of the really sad milestones, which is we have 500,000 people who've passed away from this virus. The president suggested we fly our flags at half-staff, and we are doing that. Masks have been incredibly effective at preventing the number of infections per contact with individuals. Our friends in Dimmitt County, they just can't get their acts together. Those javelinas.
Hey, get out of here! Get out of here!
The Delta variant is 40% more transmissible. It has now suddenly emerged as the most dominant variant in the United States. We can finally get some rest. Unfortunately, the hot spots are still in the same places. What are you eating? The places that are least vaccinated are the places that have the most cases. A diva. She wasn't ready to get on the set until she was called to the set. I was in my dressing room. From the southeast into the Midwest, so Tennessee, Kentucky are really, really bad. And in the Texas Medical Center, I think we're finally plateauing, but it's at a very, very high rate. We're running, last week was over 4,000 cases a day. Sneezing. I don't like sitting next to them anyway. They may have the flu, they may have some other upper respiratory infection, so I think now we have to sort of monitor symptoms a little bit more than we did in the past.
I gotta tell you, I'm really looking forward to it.
Will someone retrieve Commander Lily? And don't forget her biscuit.
This is the map of Omicron. Over 30 countries already infected. It's all over the United States, about a third of the United States. She's always rated the best. Lily, will you stop it? Jeez. Okay, come on up here. Here. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. And classic, there's a good example of a sneeze. Luckily, I projected it that way, so it's 6 to 8 feet that way, not 6 to 8 feet that way. And coughing. Coughing is also very good. That would at least allow some flexibility for people who are vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, have a seat outdoors, physically distant, enjoy yourself. Yeah. Forget the Jerry Seinfeld, then as you know, my sister lives in New York, and so we are not talking about people from the East Village, Janet. Those are other variants of concern. My sister wants to know, can I go to the theater? When it opens, and if you get tickets. She asked me a really important medical question this week, and that was, why aren't hairdressers considered essential services? I know it's crazy, but my sister's all over me, and I told her we will get through this. Maybe not her, but the rest of us. And my sister was out on the balcony looking as the sun was going down, and called me out to see this large flock of beautiful black birds that was flying around. That was the Warbridge bat colony flying around our house, heading to Herman. Let's all get out as fast as we can.